Hello. Welcome to Reality Stories, where stories do come alive. Please subscribe and share with friends. Now relax and enjoy the story. The church was small, painted white but fading at the corners. The wooden benches were filled with neighbors, family, and curious onlookers who had come to witness what many whispered was a foolish marriage. Daniel stood at the altar, wearing a borrowed black suit that was slightly too big. He kept adjusting the sleeves, but his eyes never left Grace. She walked slowly toward him in a modest white gown that her cousin had stitched together with love and effort. It wasn't lace imported from Italy or Paris, but to Daniel, she looked like a queen. When Grace reached him, her hands trembled. She wasn't afraid of marriage. She was afraid of the future. Everyone knew Daniel had nothing. No house, no car, not even stable work. He survived on odd jobs around Lagos. Yet, she had chosen him. The pastor cleared his throat. Daniel and Grace, today you stand before God and man to take a vow. A vow is not only for sunny days. It is also for the stormy nights. Do you understand? Yes, Pastor. Daniel said firmly. Grace's voice shook but carried strength. Yes, Pastor. The pastor smiled, then turned to Daniel. Repeat after me. I, Daniel, take you, Grace, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse. Daniel's eyes softened. He squeezed Grace's hands and repeated slowly, I, Daniel, take you, Grace, to be my lawfully wedded wife, to have and hold, from this day forward, for better, for worse. Grace blinked back tears as she echoed the vow. When she said the words for better or worse, her voice broke slightly. Daniel noticed and whispered, We will make it, Grace. I promise you. The congregation murmured in approval. Some smiled with genuine warmth. Others shook their heads as if to say, Love won't feed you. After the vows, when the pastor declared them husband and wife, Daniel kissed Grace gently on the forehead. Cheers erupted. Children clapped, women ululated, and a few men laughed loudly. Outside the church, the celebration was simple. Plates of jollof rice, fried plantain, and soft drinks were served. Daniel and Grace shared one malt drink, sipping from the same bottle. Grace teased him. You see how people are looking at us? Some don't believe we will last. Daniel smiled. Let them look. It's not their marriage. It's ours. Grace lowered her voice. But, Daniel, are you truly ready? You know life hasn't been easy. Daniel took her hand. Grace, listen. We may not have money, but we have each other. And I will work until my hands bleed if I must. I'd rather be poor with you than rich with anyone else. Her heart melted. Then I'll follow you for better or worse. They laughed softly, leaning into each other as fireworks of gossip exploded around them. To everyone else, they were just a struggling couple chasing a dream. But to Daniel and Grace, it was the beginning of everything. Months passed. Marriage life hit them with reality. Their small one-room apartment in Adjugunal had a leaking roof. Sometimes, when it rained, they placed buckets in the middle of the floor to catch water. Grace worked at a tailoring shop, earning little. Daniel carried bags to the market, ran errands, and did construction work when called. But every night, when they sat on their old mattress with bowls of Gary or beans, Daniel would say, Better days will come. One evening, Daniel returned home unusually excited. His shirt was dusty, but his eyes sparkled. Grace, he called, entering the room quickly. Grace, where are you? She came out of the corner, still holding a piece of cloth she had been sewing. Why are you shouting like this? Did you win a lottery? Daniel laughed. It is almost like a lottery. You won't believe it. I met someone today. A big man's son. Grace raised an eyebrow. Daniel, be careful, oh. Which kind of man? His name is Richard. We met at the construction site. He came to inspect the land his father wants to build on. He saw how I was coordinating the workers, and he liked me. He said he needs someone he can trust to handle small contracts and supplies. Grace, this is a chance we've been praying for. Grace dropped the cloth. Are you serious? He just offered you like that. Daniel nodded. I don't even understand it. He gave me his card and told me to meet him tomorrow. He said he likes my honesty and hard work. Imagine, Out of all the people there, he picked me. Grace's heart pounded. Daniel, are you sure this is not a trick? You know Legos people. Daniel stepped closer, holding her shoulders. Grace, I can feel it. This is real. Our lives are about to change. That night, Grace couldn't sleep well. She thought of all the times she had eaten food without meat, all the insults from neighbors who mocked her for marrying a poor dreamer. If this deal was real, maybe their suffering was finally ending. The next day, Daniel wore his only neat shirt and went to meet Richard. Richard was waiting at a classy restaurant in Victoria Island. His car, a black SUV with tinted glass, was parked outside. Daniel felt out of place, but Richard greeted him warmly. Daniel, my guy, Richard said, shaking his hand. Sit down. I like men like you, hard-working, serious. Lagos needs more people like that. Daniel smiled shyly. Thank you, sir. Don't call me sir, I beg. Call me Richard. I'm not too old. He laughed, sipping juice. So here's the thing. I have small contracts, supplies for building materials, helping me coordinate workers. I see you have the spirit for it. If you're loyal, there's plenty of money to make. Daniel's chest rose with pride. I will not disappoint you. Good, Richard said. Loyalty is everything. You give me loyalty, I'll give you money. Simple. That was the beginning. Weeks later, money started flowing. At first, Daniel bought Grace a new sewing machine. Then he surprised her with gold earrings. Soon after, he rented a bigger apartment with 2 bedrooms and tiled floors. One evening, Grace stood in their new kitchen, holding a pot of stew. Tears filled her eyes. Daniel came from behind and hugged her waist. Why are you crying? He whispered. Grace laughed through her tears. Because look at us. Just look at us. From leaking roof to tiled kitchen. Daniel, God is truly faithful. Daniel kissed her cheek. Did I not tell you? Better days will come. But the changes didn't stop there. Within 6 months, Daniel and Grace moved into a mansion on island. The gates were tall, the compound wide, and the living room furnished with imported chairs. Neighbors who once mocked them now whispered with envy. At their housewarming, Grace's cousin whispered, "See how marriage can change somebody's life." From Ajagunal to Banana Island, Grace smiled politely, but in her heart, she still remembered the vow, for better or worse. She prayed silently that this better would last. That night, as she and Daniel stood on the balcony, staring at the city lights, Grace said softly, "Daniel, I'm happy. But please don't let this money change you." Daniel chuckled, wrapping his arm around her. "Change me? Never. I am still the same man who drank Gary with you. Money will not scatter us." Grace leaned against him. For the first time since their wedding, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the worst was finally behind them. But little did she know, the real test of their vow was only beginning. The mansion walls sparkled with new paint, and Daniel's garage now held 2 shiny cars. He was no longer the man who begged for construction jobs in dusty jeans. Now, he wore suits, attended meetings in glass buildings, and spoke with men who had power. But as his money grew, something else grew too, his pride. One Saturday morning, Grace entered the living room, carrying a tray of breakfast. She found Daniel on the phone, pacing back and forth. Yes, Richard. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Don't worry, just keep the drinks cold, Daniel said, laughing loudly. Grace set the tray down. Daniel, won't you eat first? Later, Grace. Business before food. You know how it is now. She frowned. But you hardly sit with me anymore. Every day it's meeting. Even when you're home, your phone is louder than your voice. Daniel waved his hand dismissively. Grace, I beg, don't start this morning. You think all this wealth came by sleeping on the bed? If I don't hustle with Richard, who will pay for this house you're enjoying? Her chest tightened. It's not the house I want, Daniel. It's you, the man I married in that small church. The man who used to look me in the eye and say, better days will come. But now you barely look at me. Daniel grabbed his car keys. Don't exaggerate. I still love you. But let me remind you, This life we're living now is not beans. I must keep close to Richard. That's how rich men stay rich. The door slammed behind him, leaving Grace staring at the untouched breakfast. Richard was more than just a business partner. He was also a man of influence, smooth-talking, full of ideas, always surrounded by people who admired him. And he liked introducing Daniel to high life. Nightclubs, private parties, gatherings filled with music, laughter, and women. It was at one of these parties that Clara entered Daniel's world. She was stunning. Her skin glowed like polished bronze. Her dress hugged her figure like it was made only for her, and her perfume filled the air before she even spoke. Clara knew how to smile in a way that made men forget their names. Richard clapped Daniel on the back. "My guy, meet Clara. She's in charge of fashion exports. One of our partners. Sharp babe, sharp business." Clara extended her hand, her red nails glinting under the light. "So you're the famous Daniel Richard keeps talking about. I've heard you're the man who came from nothing and now sits among kings." Daniel chuckled, shaking her hand. "They exaggerate. I'm still learning." Clara tilted her head, her eyes scanning him. "Learning suits you well." The night moved on, but Clara's presence lingered. She laughed at Daniel's jokes, touched his arm lightly when speaking, and whispered things only he could hear. By the time the party ended, Daniel was smiling wider than usual, his mind stirred by the attention of someone who seemed to understand his new status. Back at home, Grace was waiting. The clock read 2:15 a.m. When Daniel walked in smelling of expensive cologne and alcohol, she stood up. "Daniel, where have you been?" "I was worried." He loosened his tie, avoiding her eyes. "I told you I had business with Richard." "At midnight? Business? Or is it another one of those parties?" He sighed heavily. "Grace, please, don't make this a big issue. This is how networking works. If I don't go, they'll see me as small boy. You want me to lose opportunities." Grace stepped closer. "It's not the opportunities one fear, Daniel. It's the people you're becoming close to. The kind of women." Daniel snapped. "Enough, Grace. Don't nag me like those women in the market. I know what I'm doing." Her lips trembled, but she swallowed her words. She remembered the vow, for better or worse. So she turned away, whispering to herself, "Lord, give me strength." But deep in her heart, she knew the temptation had already entered her marriage. It began with small signs. Daniel started coming home later than usual. Sometimes his phone would ring, and he would rush outside to answer, speaking in low tones. Grace noticed new perfumes on his clothes, perfumes that were not hers. One afternoon, as she arranged the wardrobe, a small golden bracelet slipped from Daniel's suit pocket. It wasn't hers. It smelled faintly of Clara's perfume, the same one she remembered when Daniel had returned from that party. Her chest grew heavy, but she said nothing. One evening, Grace decided to surprise Daniel by visiting his office. She carried a food basket filled with his favorite egusi soup and pounded yam. She told herself, maybe if I remind him of home, he will remember us. But when she entered the building, the receptionist looked at her strangely. "Madam, Mr. Daniel is in a meeting," the woman said hesitantly. Grace smiled politely. "I'll just wait inside." Without waiting for permission, she walked down the hall. As she neared Daniel's office, she heard laughter, a woman's laughter. The door was slightly open. Grace's heart pounded. She peeked in. There on the leather chair sat Clara. She leaned close to Daniel, whispering something in his ear. Daniel laughed, his hand resting comfortably on her thigh. For a moment, the world spun around Grace. The food basket nearly slipped from her hands. She wanted to burst in, to scream, to slap Daniel across the face. But instead, she stepped back quietly, tears burning her eyes. She returned home without saying a word. That night, when Daniel came home, Grace was sitting silently on the sofa. He loosened his tie, whistling as though nothing had happened. Grace finally spoke, her voice calm but trembling. "Who is Clara to you?" Daniel froze, then forced a laugh. "Clara? She's just a business partner." "Why?" Grace stared at him. "Business partner?" Do business partners sit in dark offices, whispering and laughing with your hand on their leg? His smile faded. Grace, you followed me? Her eyes filled with pain. I didn't follow you. I came to bring you food. Food you never ate. And what I saw, she swallowed hard. What I saw broke me, Daniel. Daniel dropped his briefcase. It's not what you think. Clara was just... Don't lie to me. Grace snapped, standing up. I saw you with my own eyes. Do you know what hurt me the most? It wasn't even Clara. It was the way you looked at her. That's how you used to look at me. The silence that followed was louder than any shout. Daniel finally muttered, Grace, you're blowing this out of proportion. You know I love you. She shook her head. Love is not words, Daniel. Love is action. And your actions, her voice broke. Your actions are killing me. She turned away, wiping her tears. But then she remembered the vow, the very word she had spoken at the altar, for better or worse. So she didn't leave. Instead, she whispered softly, I'll stay, not because of you, but because of the vow I made before God. For worse, this is my worse. Daniel looked at her, guilt flickering across his face, but pride held his tongue. And in the shadows of that mansion, a bitterness began to grow inside Grace's heart. Silent, heavy, and dangerous. Clara knew exactly what she was doing. She was more than a pretty face. She was smart, calculating, and dangerous. Every time she met Daniel, she planted small seeds of doubt, watering them with sweet words and poisonous suggestions. One afternoon, they sat together in a luxury lounge. Clara sipped her wine slowly, her eyes fixed on Daniel. Daniel, she said softly, you're a great man. Do you know that? Daniel smirked. You think so? I don't just think, I know, but greatness must not be held back. And I feel, she leaned closer, I feel you're being held back. Daniel frowned. Held back by who? Clara tilted her head. By Grace. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Grace is my wife. Yes, Clara said smoothly, but she is still living with a small girl's mind. She doesn't understand your level now. You're in rooms with politicians, with millionaires, and she is still worrying about simple things like why you come home late. Daniel, such a woman will drag you down. Daniel's jaw tightened. Grace has been with me since the beginning. She was there when I had nothing. Clara reached out, touching his hand. Yes, but sometimes the people who were with you in your past are not the right people for your future. Those words burned in his chest long after she left. Meanwhile, Grace felt the distance growing daily. Daniel came home less often, and when he did, he barely spoke to her. She tried cooking his favorite meals, wearing dresses he once loved, but his eyes were elsewhere. One evening, as she sat on the balcony, lost in thought, she heard a familiar voice from the gate. Grace. It was Michael, Daniel's childhood friend. Unlike Daniel, Michael had remained simple. He worked as a schoolteacher, lived modestly, and carried a warmth that money could not buy. Grace smiled faintly. Michael was a surprise. He entered the compound, carrying a small bag of fruits. I was passing by and thought to check on you. You've been on my mind. She led him inside. Thank you. It's good to see a friendly face. Michael looked around the mansion and whistled softly. Daniel really made it. But you don't look happy, Grace. Are you okay? Her eyes watered. Michael, sometimes I feel like I lost my husband even though he's still alive. He's here, but not really here. Michael's gaze softened. Grace, you deserve joy. Don't let anyone make you feel small. You've always been the strong one. Even back then, when Daniel had nothing, you carried him with your faith. His words pierced her heart, like a balm to her wounds. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen. She quickly wiped her tears. Thank you, Michael. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. Michael nodded quietly. I'll always be here, Grace, as a friend. But in the silence that followed, both of them felt something deeper stirring. That night, Daniel returned late, smelling of alcohol. Grace gathered her courage. Daniel, can we talk? Talk about what? He asked coldly. About us. About Clara. His face darkened. What about Clara? She is coming between us. And I don't like it. Daniel laughed bitterly. Grace, you are too paranoid. Clara is smart. She's business-minded. She's teaching me things you can never understand. Grace's voice cracked. Are you saying I am not enough for you anymore? Daniel snapped. Sometimes I wonder, Grace. Sometimes I feel like you're too small for where I'm going. Her heart shattered, but she held her ground. Daniel, remember the vow you made before God, for better or worse. He looked away, guilt flickering across his eyes, but pride silenced him. And in that moment, Clara's manipulation was winning. It was Richard's birthday party, a grand event at one of the most expensive hotels in Lagos. The hall glittered with chandeliers, the air heavy with perfumes, music, and laughter. Wealthy men and women danced, while waiters carried trays of champagne. Daniel arrived with Grace by his side, though she felt out of place in her simple gown. Clara, on the other hand, was dazzling in a red dress that turned every head. The moment Clara saw them, she smiled wickedly. She walked up and kissed Daniel on the cheek, ignoring Grace completely. Daniel, she purred, I was waiting for you. Grace clenched her fists, but Daniel didn't stop Clara. Instead, he smiled sheepishly. As the evening wore on, Clara stayed glued to Daniel. When people raised toasts, she whispered into his ear. When music played, she dragged him to the dance floor. Grace sat alone at a table, humiliated, her face burning with shame. At one point, Clara laughed loudly and said, Daniel, tell us, how do you cope with a village wife while living like a king? Laughter erupted from the crowd. Daniel looked at Grace. For a brief second, he could have defended her, but instead, he raised his glass and said jokingly, sometimes even kings need charity. The laughter grew louder. Grace's eyes filled with tears. She stood up quietly and walked out the hall, her heart breaking into pieces. Later that night, Grace sat on the steps outside their mansion, her face wet with tears. The moon shone above, mocking her loneliness. Suddenly, a voice called softly, Grace? It was Michael. He had heard about the party and had come to check on her. Grace looked at him with trembling lips. Michael, he humiliated me, in front of everyone, as if I'm nothing. Michael sat beside her, his presence calm and steady. Grace, you are not nothing. You are everything. Daniel may have forgotten, but I haven't. You deserve love, respect, and honor. She leaned against him, sobbing, for a dangerous moment. The warmth of his arms felt like the home she had lost. Michael, she whispered, sometimes I wish I had married a man like you. He froze, his heart pounding. Slowly, he lifted her chin. Their eyes locked. The distance between them vanished until their lips were almost touching. But suddenly, Grace pulled back, shaking her head violently. No, I can't. I made a vow. I can't betray myself like this. Michael nodded slowly, his voice low. I understand, but just know, I will always care for you. Grace stood up, wiping her tears. Thank you, Michael. You're the only reason I haven't broken completely. As she walked back inside, her heart remained torn between a vow that chained her to Daniel and the love that silently bloomed with Michael. And in the shadows of the night, betrayal had written its name on all of them. The warning signs were there, but Daniel was too blinded by pride and Clara's sweet whispers to see them. One humid afternoon, Daniel walked into Richard's office, smiling widely. Clara was already seated beside Richard, her red lips curved in a sly smile. Daniel, my guy. Richard shouted, standing to hug him. Today is the day we make history. This deal will put you among the top men in Lagos. Daniel grinned. That's what I like to hear. Richard poured him a glass of whiskey. The governor's men are ready. We just need you to sign the documents, transfer a small percentage, and the contract is yours. Daniel glanced at Clara, who gave him a reassuring nod. Trust me, Daniel, she said smoothly. This is the deal that will make you untouchable. Daniel signed without reading carefully. After all, these were his friends. 2 weeks later, the storm arrived. Grace was in the kitchen when she heard Daniel shouting on the phone. She rushed to the living room and found him pacing, sweat dripping from his forehead. "What do you mean fraudulent?" he yelled into the phone. "I followed everything Richard said. No, it can't be. I'm innocent." He threw the phone against the wall. "Daniel, what happened?" Grace asked, panic rising in her chest. He turned to her, his face pale. "They're accusing me of corruption. They said I signed illegal contracts. They froze my accounts, Grace. All my money gone overnight." Grace gasped. "What of Richard? Clara? Won't they speak for you?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Richard is nowhere to be found. Clara's number is switched off. They set me up." The truth hit him like thunder. Clara had vanished with millions from his accounts. Richard had used him as a scapegoat. Everything he built on shaky ground crumbled in a single night. The following days were filled with shame. Newspapers carried headlines. Young mogul involved in fraud scandal. Daniel O., once a rising star, now disgraced. Neighbors who once admired him now whispered insults. Old friends avoided his calls. At home, Grace found him sitting in the dark, his head in his hands. "Daniel," she whispered, "we will find a way. Don't lose hope." His voice was hollow. "Hope? Grace, I've lost everything. Clara, she was right there and I trusted her. Now she's gone. And Richard, he used me like a rag." Tears filled Grace's eyes, but she placed her hand on his shoulder. "You still have me. You still have your wife. Remember the vow? For worse." Daniel looked at her, broken. For the first time, he realized the gold and glitter had blinded him to the one person who truly stood by him. But it was too late. His empire was gone. The mansion that once glowed with chandeliers now echoed with emptiness. One by one, Grace sold the furniture. First the imported chairs, then the flat-screen TVs, then the cars. Each sale was a dagger to Daniel's pride. One afternoon, as men carried out the last sofa, Daniel exploded. "Grace, why are you selling everything? This is my house. My sweat." Grace kept her voice calm. "Your sweat cannot pay the debts. Your sweat cannot stop the bank from taking this mansion. I'm doing what must be done." Daniel slammed his fist against the wall. "So, I will go back to being nobody after all I achieved?" Grace's eyes softened with sadness. "Daniel, sometimes God takes us back to dust so we can remember who we truly are." The day finally came when they had to leave. Grace stood in the empty living room, holding their wedding photo. Daniel stood at the doorway, his shoulders slumped, his eyes hollow. As they walked out of the mansion, Daniel stopped and looked back. His voice cracked. "I never thought I'd lose it all." Grace touched his arm gently. "You haven't lost it all. You still have life. You still have me." Tears welled up in Daniel's eyes, but pride still fought within him. "But I don't deserve you, Grace. I humiliated you. I made you suffer." Grace wiped his tears. "For better or worse, Daniel, that was the vow. Even in the dust, I will stand." Later that night, in their small rented apartment, Daniel sat on the bed, broken. He turned to Grace, his voice trembling. "Grace, please don't leave me. Everyone has abandoned me. Richard, Clara, even my so-called friends. You're all I have left. Please, Grace, don't leave me." Grace looked at him for a long moment. Memories flashed before her eyes. The vows at the altar, the nights of Gary and beans, the humiliation at the party, the betrayal with Clara. She whispered softly, "Daniel, I should have left you long ago, but my vow keeps me here. Not because of you, but because of God." Daniel buried his face in her lap, sobbing like a child. "I'm sorry, Grace. I was blind. I thought money was everything. But now I see you were the treasure all along." Grace stroked his head, her own tears falling silently. In that small room, stripped of wealth and pride, Daniel faced his true downfall, not the loss of money, but the shame of realizing he had traded love for vanity. And Grace, though broken and bitter, remembered the vow that tied her to him, for better or worse. The night was heavy with silence. Grace sat outside the small rented apartment, staring at the moon. Her hands played absently with her wedding ring, twisting it around her finger. The ring had once symbolized hope, but now it felt like a chain. A gentle voice broke the silence. "Grace." She turned and saw Michael walking toward her, his hands in his pockets, his face soft with concern. He had always been there, quiet, steady, loyal. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Michael said, pulling up a chair beside her. Grace forced a small smile. "I needed air. Inside feels too heavy sometimes." Michael studied her face. "Grace, you've carried a burden too heavy for one woman. I see it every time you force yourself to smile." Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "I made a vow, Michael, for better or worse. I can't just throw that away." Michael leaned closer, his voice low and trembling. "But what about you? What about your heart, your peace? Daniel took your love, broke it, and threw it in the dirt. I was there when he humiliated you at that party. I was there when you cried alone, and still you stayed. But Grace, who is staying for you?" Grace's lips parted, but no words came out. Michael's eyes softened, full of sincerity. "Grace, I love you. I've loved you from the moment Daniel introduced you years ago. I stayed quiet because he was my brother in spirit, and you were his. But now, I can't hold it in anymore." Grace's breath caught. Her fingers trembled. "Michael, don't say this. Please." "I have to," Michael whispered. "I can give you peace, Grace. Not riches, not mansions, but peace. A home where you won't cry yourself to sleep. A love that won't humiliate you in public. I would never betray you. Not once." Tears spilled down Grace's cheeks. "Michael, you don't know what you're asking. I still wear this ring." Michael reached out, gently touching her hand. "I'm not asking you to betray your vow. I'm asking you to choose life. Choose happiness. You deserve better. And if you give me one chance, Grace, I will spend my life proving it to you." Grace pulled her hand back quickly, her heart pounding. "Michael, stop, please. Don't make this harder than it already is." He sighed, leaning back, pain etched on his face. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't keep it inside anymore. You needed to know there's another path. You don't have to keep drowning in Daniel's mistakes. You can start over, with me." The night air grew heavy again. Grace sat in silence, tears sliding down her cheeks. Deep inside, she felt the truth. Michael was offering everything Daniel had failed to give, but her vows still echoed in her ears. For better or worse, her heart was a battlefield, torn between loyalty and freedom. The railway station was alive with noise, trains screeching, vendors shouting, footsteps echoing on the old concrete. But in the middle of the chaos, two men stood on opposite sides of Grace's destiny. On one platform, Daniel sat on a worn wooden bench. He clutched their old wedding photo, his fingers shaking. His once proud face was now gaunt, humbled, desperate. Every second he scanned the crowd, searching for the only woman who had not abandoned him. "Please come, Grace," he muttered under his breath. "Please don't give up on me." Across the station, near the ticket counter, Michael stood. His posture was calm, but his eyes restless, scanning the crowd with hope. He wasn't holding riches or memories, just his open arms, ready to build a new life with her if she chose him. Then Grace appeared. She wore a simple dress, her hair tied back, her face pale with tension. The weight of her decision showed in every step she took. People bustled around her, but she saw only two faces, Daniel's broken plea and Michael's steady hope. Her heart raced. Every memory came rushing back. Daniel slipping the ring on her finger, Daniel dancing with Clara at that party, Daniel crying in her lap, begging her not to leave. Then Michael, his quiet loyalty, his soft confession, his promise of peace. Daniel rose to his feet as soon as he saw her. His voice cracked. "Grace, over here. Please come back to me." He lifted the wedding photo, holding it like a holy relic. "Remember the vow, Grace, for better or worse." Grace froze, tears stinging her eyes. Michael took a step forward, his voice steady. "Grace, you've suffered enough. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Choose peace. Choose yourself. Choose me." Her breathing quickened. The noise of the station faded. For a moment, the world held its breath. Daniel fell to his knees, clutching the photo. "Don't leave me, Grace. Don't let them win. I can change. I'll be a better man. Just don't walk away." Michael stretched out his hand across the distance. "Grace, you deserve joy, not chains. Walk to me. Let me give you the love you've always given to others." Grace looked from one to the other. Her chest rose and felt as though her heart would burst. One step forward. The crowd shifted. Another step. Both men's eyes followed her. Finally, Grace paused at the center, where both paths divided. Her hands slowly lifted. The wedding ring gleamed under the station lights. The crowd kept moving. Trains kept whistling, but for Grace, time stopped. She took a deep breath. A tear slid down her cheek. Then, she turned. The camera of fate followed her steps, toward a man whose life would never be the same. But just as her fingers reached out, the scene faded to black. The last thing shown was the wedding photo Daniel dropped, shattering on the platform floor.